They've got like an entire investigative arm of every major newspaper looking under every rock.
We have a criminal investigation with a special counsel where there was no information about any quote-unquote collusion available to anybody on the Russians. CNN doesn't have any. MSNBC doesn't have any. The Holocaust-denying New York Times doesn't have any. The Washington Post doesn't have any. And this criminal investigation goes on. And when you look at this in context, what was done against the Reagan administration by a Democrat, when you look what was done in the FDR administration by spies, including Democrats working for the Soviets. I'm sorry, this is the history. And then you look at what they're doing today, turning the government upside down, turning the country upside down. If there's a meeting, if there's an email, if there's a text, if there's something, it's an impeachable offense. It's real absolute media insanity.
Well, I had a liberal friend who emailed me about 6 or 7 months ago wanting my help on this stuff. And I'm like, where have you guys been, man? Right? Now all of a sudden you hate the Russians, of all things. And he wanted to know, too, he said, isn't this the worst threat in the world right now, Putin? And they've gone from being lambs to being wolves on this issue.
But when they take back the White House one of these days, they'll go back to being lambs. We'll be right back. I have to ask you this, Professor. The media and the groupthink of the 1930s and 40s, they really let us down, as far as I'm concerned. And it's not only this, and we're not going to get into this today, but there have been books written about how the New York Times and other media, big media, basically downplayed the Holocaust because they had a progressive mindset and for a whole bunch of reasons. You look at that period, then you look at the Reagan period, where he was taking on the Soviet Union. He knew what he wanted to do. He really wanted to defeat them. And they were pushing investigations, and they pushed Iran-Contra. They wanted to take him out, too. And the media was part of that course. The media today, which clearly from day one have wanted to take out this president, and they're on it every day. They give a pre-speech analysis. The other day he gives a speech about the border and the budget. Then they give a post-speech analysis. Now they have fact-checkers. In order to conceal, I believe, their ideology. Is that the problem? Is that the problem? Have the media become devoured by the progressive movement the way Hollywood has, the way academia has for the most part, the way the Democrat Party has? Are they just another appendage of the progressive movement at this point?
I think they're driven by their biases, and they deny that. But, I mean, just look at CNN. It's just 24/7 Trump, Trump, Trump. A friend of mine in the media says that CNN's treating the Trump presidency like a natural disaster, like a hurricane, right? And it's just all negative news all the time. You really can't even go there for news that much.
And it's the tone. You actually have people comparing him to Adolf Hitler, to Joseph Stalin, as a white supremacist, as an anti-Semite who has Jewish children and grandchildren. And they call him a liar. You look at MSNBC, it's day in and day out. CNN does exactly the same thing. They debate whether or not he should be able, as President of the United States, to give a speech to the nation on our networks because he can't be trusted. He's a liar. I'm afraid that the media have turned a corner around which they'll never return. That is, that they are so ideologically driven and in one direction that it has become basically a party mouthpiece for the Democrat Party.
Well, I think it has been for a long time. And in fact, I could see a liberal watching this show saying, no, it's just because Trump is uniquely bad. No. You guys did this to Bush. You did it to both Bushes. Maxine Waters called George H.W. Bush a racist in 1992 and then doubled down on it and said, no, I'm not apologizing for it. I think he's a racist. They said horrible things about Reagan. I mean, remember, it was unbelievable the things that they said about Reagan. And Reagan in the 1980s didn't have Fox. He didn't have the internet. He didn't have conservative talk radio. I mean, basically, it was ABC, CBS, and NBC. It was completely controlled by the Democrats.
And to underscore your point, in 1964, Barry Goldwater, you had that publication called Fact. You had 1,100 and some odd psychiatrists who commented on him, basically saying that he was mentally unhinged, mentally ill. Then you had the Goldwater rule put in place by the Association for whatever.
Right.
They broke the rule this time with Trump, Again, they drag on some psychiatrists and psychologists who claim he's mentally unhinged. Let's talk about the 25th Amendment. They don't do this sort of thing with Obama. They don't do this sort of thing with Hillary Clinton. They don't do this sort of thing with Harry Truman, John Kennedy, and so forth. That's why I think when we talk about freedom of the press, it's time that we, the people, really start talking about it, because freedom of the press exists for us.
Sure.
It doesn't exist for Time Warner. It doesn't exist for Comcast that owns these. The point of freedom of the press, freedom of the speech, the First Amendment of the Constitution, is for the people. Do you think the people are being served by the media today?
No, I don't. And it's why you need to push, I think, for even more different types of media, and why people need to go to sources like this, like your show. And I think it's why conservatives need to use media platforms, social media. Again, with Reagan in the 80s, what did Reagan have, Mark? He had like National Review, American Spectator, Human Events. And that was it, right? I don't even know if the Washington Times had started up here. At least
you know what? As you well know, 2 massive electoral landslides.
Yes.
And the second time around, even though Kennedy was conspiring against him.
Which is an amazing thing.
Massive popular vote, 49 states on the Electoral College, and about 1,000 short of taking the 50th state, yes, Minnesota, from the guy who was running against him, Walter Mondale. We'll be right back. Now, today, the modern Democrat Party is supposed to be upset about Russia. They're electing more and more so-called democratic socialists that have a lot in common with some aspects of that regime. But let's look at this quickly. You have Cuba. You have the New York Times strongly supported the Castro Revolution. You have Jim Wright, former Speaker of the House, Democrat, meeting with Ortega, communist, in Nicaragua, and he's back, and he's a thug. You have John Kerry in 1971, and it's in your book, who's meeting with the North Vietnam Communist delegation before the peace negotiations, the official peace negotiations. Maybe there's a reason why the media in this country never provide context for the reports. You've got millennials out there who probably don't know anything that we're talking about, probably aren't taught about it in college and so forth. So they want you to believe that this Russia collusion thing and so forth and so on is a one-off, and that it exists, and this email means everything, and this text means everything, and this meeting means everything. Am I wrong?
No. And in fact, the New York Times reporting on Cuba, it was Herb Matthews who did the infamous reporting. It was like 1957, and I think it was even Che Guevara that said, when the world gave us up for dead, it was the Matthews article in the New York Times that resurrected us. It's very true. And John Kerry, after that meeting, he would also go and he would testify before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about our troops committing war crimes in Vietnam, reminiscent in a fashion of Genghis Khan, as he put it, right? Genghis Khan.
And Genghis Khan
that's right.
was the greatest genocidal maniac the Earth has ever known. He killed 11% of the world's population.
Yeah, it's awful that he would say that. And, of course, that came back to bite him in 2004 with the Swift boat.
And yet he was still nominated.
Well, and that's exactly. He was the Democratic nominee in 2004. So not only did they really not complain about it that much on their side, it was allowed to go through to the point where he became the junior senator from Massachusetts under Senator Ted Kennedy, the senior senator, and got the Democratic nomination in 2004. So the media, the liberal media, has an incredible ability to ignore the glacier, right? And then focus on something else, or again, look under every rock, look for a bugaboo under every bed when it comes to somebody like Donald Trump. It all depends on whether it affects their guy, if it's their guy in the office, or if it's their guy who's not in the office.
All right. It's been a great pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Yes, sure
we appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Don't forget, join us next time on Life, Liberty, and Levin.